Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Hello and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you've been watching my social media or listening to some of my podcasts, I've been talking a lot about Cameron Hanes' new book, which is called Endure, and it's all about his athletic achievements as well as his sporting achievements in archery. And I've just been so fascinated with his ability to literally endure some of the things that he's done. And today's show is the exact opposite of enduring a 200-mile run. Today is about taking a step back and slowing down a little bit. And I've got Naz Beheshti on the line, and I appreciate her being here today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
You've got a new book out. What is it? Pause, Breathe, Choose, Become the CEO of Your Well-Being, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear about the book, but I'd also like to hear some background on you. You know, a lot of our guests talk about their entrepreneurial adventures or their work endeavors all the way back to a young age, if you so desire. As an example, I was selling gum in the school parking lot when I was in high school, but you don't have to go back that far. But give us some background on you.
Sure. Happy to. So considering this podcast is about saying yes, I had a very pivotal moment in my first job right out of college. It was a job that I was tempted to say no to. It was a job I was not looking for. It was not why I went to school. I studied psychology and wanted to take that and do, other things, not necessarily become a psychologist, but not end up doing what I ended up doing, which was saying yes to being Steve Jobs' executive assistant at Apple. It was the farthest thing from what I had planned. And I pretty much just accidentally got that job and was, tempted to say no. My parents, friends, family, everyone was like, you're crazy if you say no. It's Steve Jobs. And he hired me on the spot. So I said yes. And saying yes to him led me to finding my passion and purpose. And he actually helped influence me in terms of being able to be courageous enough to actually pursue my passion and purpose. Because a lot of us may, some people don't know what their passion and purpose is. Some people know what it is, but it's, takes a lot of courage to pursue it. Well, I was very fortunate to have my first boss and, mentor, Steve Jobs, help me, influence me, inspire me to start my own company, which is a corporate wellness company and executive wellness coaching company. And between working for him right out of college when I was 21 to starting my own company, I worked in different organizations from Fortune 100 companies to startups, tech startups, and got a lot of various experience in different companies as EAs, as, sales, wearing many, many different hats. Took all that experience and started my own company that was inspired by Steve, and also being that stressed out employee and not having the tools in the workplace, because back then employee well-being, corporate wellness was very nascent industry, right? Now it's more accepted and not thought of as just a luxury, but a necessity to have, especially now during a pandemic. Mental health awareness and mental health really matters, and people are seeing that. And so I take a very holistic approach to total well-being and help employees and leaders of companies manage their stress, build their resilience, and really just live their best life.
Yeah. What were your parents like as it related to the direction of your career? Obviously, there was some influence there saying you'd be crazy not to work for Steve Jobs, but I find it fascinating the level that you jumped into the job market, and what level of influence did your parents have in your early decisions?
Well, they always raise me by saying, we trust your judgment. So whenever I go for them for advice, they would listen to what I'm, thinking about, but then in the end say, we know you're going to make, the right decision because we trust you and we trust your judgment. But when it goes back to my childhood, I was born in Iran during a couple years later, the revolution broke out. And my parents basically put their kids and themselves and their safety as a priority and said yes to moving, not even moving. It was actually saying yes to a vacation to San Francisco at the time. And the revolution broke out and we ended up staying. So I'm actually still on an indefinite vacation from when I was two years old. And that decision, I mean, the whole thing about saying yes and like how our life is built is based on the choices we make. And what do we say yes to? What do we say no to? What are the choices we make every day? So their choice and them saying yes to moving out of that country indefinitely, even though that wasn't the intention, but it just wasn't a safe place to go return to, really changed the course and path of my life. Because if not, I would be back home in Iran and Tehran, married with probably, several kids at this age and not a career. I would not be speaking to you right now about my passion and purpose and have Prana Naz, my company. So they highly influenced my path and my life by making that first choice when I was young. And then moving forward, it was all about, we trust you. And so I always obviously wanted them to be proud of me. So I never took anything lightly. And I always, made my decisions very pragmatically and made sure that I was trying to do the best that I could for myself and for them.
Yeah. Just curious. Do you ever feel a little bit resentful that you're here instead of over there? Like, what would my life have been like over there? I know that a lot of people are displaced here in the United States that really grasp onto their cultures.
My generation, I would say absolutely not. For me personally, my parents, however, they are, always optimistic and thinking like things will change. We could move back. I mean, now this day and age, as they're older, maybe not so much, but always growing up, they had the hope that we would move back eventually. But I have really, I consider myself now, Persian American. I grew up here. I love the freedom of here. And I love that I was able to, again, find my passion and purpose and pursue it and be independent. And I started things later. I got married later in life. I just recently had my first baby and I'm, older. All of this would have happened in my early 20s without a career back there. So I do not have any resentment or regrets in any way.
Yeah, well, we do live in the greatest country in the world. So thank you for recognizing how great it is over here. I do not want to make this interview about Steve Jobs, but I'm curious about, the effect that he had on you and a little bit more in depth. I mean, certainly we've all read how intense he can be as a leader. And how does one manage that, especially, as your first career decision and working for somebody of that caliber and level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it was extremely intense to say the least. I mean, he's an intense, iconic visionary, right? And so that being said, he was very influential, highly, highly influential and inspiring. So I was young, I had thick skin. Again, because I didn't, want the job fully, like it wasn't something I was nervous about, but at the end of the day, I was always grateful, thankful that I had my job, because there were people who would get fired, and not have their job by the end of the day. So for me to not have gotten fired by him and like kept my job was really like an accomplishment in itself. And I, at the time, just treated him and thought this is just a regular job and he's just a regular person. Whereas, a lot of people might think he's, a celebrity or iconic or whatever the case, and be nervous or overwhelmed, intimidated to be in his presence. I know people at Apple would be nervous to get in the elevator with him because they were worried about the awkward conversation in the elevator. So they would wait and let him go up by himself. And I didn't have that feeling. And in fact, I think because I wasn't nervous and I didn't care in the way that other people did, that's why I got the job, because I was just very authentic and just myself. And I wasn't nervous. And when your nerves get the best of you, you can't show up as your best self. So then there's that awkward energy in the room, right? And even though he was awkward at times and intense, you being that way doesn't help the situation. So I was just genuinely me, and it just worked out, and he hired me on the spot.
I bet he wished more people rode up the elevator with him. He was probably a little bit lonely.
It is lonely at the top. I mean, I wrote an article in Forbes about that, being lonely at the top. Whereas, even me being his EA, I rarely went to the Apple Cafe and sat there. I would get my food and come back, and eat it, because he wanted very discreet people around him and not to go and socialize and share information. I never told people while I was working with him outside of Apple that I was his EA, because then I would get all the questions and wanting favors and this and that. I never told people what I did until after I worked for him. Then I would let them know that if they wanted to know that that's what I did, but I never shared it at the time, just for privacy purposes.
Yeah, I've certainly been around that a little bit. My brother was the trustee and CEO of In-N-Out Burger out of California. And he would never tell anybody what he did, and he's a normal guy, right? So pumps his own gas and the whole bit, but he would never tell anybody for that reason, and what he taught me is it's important. He said the hardest part of his job is saying no, actually, because everybody wants something.
Oh yeah.
Just interesting to think about the position you were in and the level of, maybe not your stress because you handled it differently, but the level of stress that other people might have. I worked in a corporate environment where we had to wear a suit and tie to work every single day. We had to hang our coats on the back of the door, not on our chair. We couldn't eat in the office. The desks were beautiful mahogany wood. It just was the perfect environment. Even the executive carpet was a little bit thicker than the rest of our carpet. But, I remember how nervous everybody was, including myself, to go in and sit with the president or the owner to have just an everyday conversation about our jobs. And I remember being nervous myself, sweaty palms, and I had a lot of confidence, and I worked directly for the owner and the president. When you think back on that and the negative effects as it relates to, just your overall nerves and stress and all these other things, I know that that's not isolated for yourself or your team members at Apple or my team members where I was at. I'm sure it's national in corporations around the country. How do we help with that? How do we get out of that zone and that intense nervousness and anxiety that we have in our workplace?
That's a great question. There's so many things to do. So I teach stress management and how to build resilience. So when you are facing a situation like that, if you have instilled very healthy habits and mindfulness, meditation, eating healthy, exercise, sleeping well, and you're taking care of yourself, you're able to show up to those situations with, more energy. And then also with the stress management tools that I teach, and I have over 80 proven strategies in my book, Pause, Breathe, Choose, that you can incorporate. You then start learning the tools and start applying the tools. And in fact, I'm happy to share one tool that I use myself, and I also start all of my coaching sessions. That is, if people are open to a brief meditation practice, but just a small 1-minute practice to get grounded and centered before we start a meeting, or before you go into a meeting that's nerve-wracking, or before a presentation, for example. And if you're open for and you think your listeners would like it, I'm happy to guide you through just a minute or so of a mindfulness practice right now.
Yeah, I would love to do that, because I just feel like there's just a desire out there and a need for people to just take a step back and have some confidence in what they're doing. And, as you mentioned earlier, the COVID environment that we're coming out of and the stresses that we've all overcome the last couple of years, I think any tool that we can put in our tool chest, to just bring it down a notch and be a little bit more encouraged in our day, that would be wonderful. So please walk us through that. If you're listening, take a second, put things aside, pay attention. If you're driving, maybe you can come back to this later and perform the exercise, but I'm very interested in hearing how to do this.
All right. So let's take a pause and sit in a comfortable seated position. Your legs are uncrossed, feet are planted on the earth. Gently close your eyes. Your palms are resting on your lap, facing up. Let's roll our shoulders up to our ears, back and down, lifting your chest up. Let's do a couple neck rolls, rolling your neck in one direction, slowly and gently, releasing any tension that you may be carrying with you, and then reversing the direction, slowly and gently, coming back to a full circle and back to a neutral spine. Your chin is parallel to the earth. Let's take a deep inhale together. Inhale. Exhale it all out. 2 more audible sounds like that. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Continue breathing here at your own pace with your awareness on your breath. Whenever you have any thoughts or sounds that may disrupt the pattern of the breath, that's okay. Just imagine a balloon in the sky, putting those thoughts, putting those sounds into the balloon, then just allowing them to float away. So you're going to acknowledge them, let them go, and return to your breath. We'll be here for a short moment together, sitting still with our awareness on our breath. When you're ready, slowly begin to bring your awareness back into the room. Wiggle your toes and your fingers. And when you're ready, slowly and gently begin to open your eyes. How was that for you?
Well, it was unexpected for me to get in that zone, but man, it felt good. You know, and I've got a beautiful environment I'm looking out onto with the horses and the pastures out here. But, you know, it's so important to get in a space like that. 2 things came to mind as I was in that space. One is I'm rereading for probably the 10th time Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he gives 30 bullet points. And this is written in, just post-depression. He gives 30 bullet points of ways to be successful and get into a mindset of being a millionaire. I was surprised to hear again, one of those bullet points was the importance of breathing. Right?
Absolutely.
And I thought, interesting, So that came to mind. And then a good friend of mine, Sean Whalen, who owns the Lion's Den, they have a weekly Zoom call, very intense on core values. And one of his core values is, of course, health. And he had a mindset coach an entire, 560 people on the call for an hour and a half on one of these Zooms. And I know more than half the group thought this is crazy, but I'm sure a lot of people benefited from that. So thank you for doing that on our show. And listen, if you're listening and you participated, congratulations, because I'm sure you feel a little bit better. But I'm going to put the website and access to Naz so that you can reach out and find out more about what she's doing. Before I let you go, because we got a few more minutes, I got a couple more topics for you, if you don't mind.
Of course.
It's hard to shift gears out of how I feel right now, but we got a little bit of a job to do. I had the advantage of working with some high performing athletes like Bill Walton. I mentioned before the call, Sugar Ray Leonard, and when I'm around those people, I feel like, what smart questions can I ask? What can I extract from these people that have achieved greatness? And I'm just curious, with your time around Steve Jobs, what you extracted that you applied to your life in business, because you were able to spend probably a lot of time around him. Because I just think that a lot of us are around great people, but we forget to ask the questions or look for that open opportunity.
Yeah, he taught me through example, the way he lived his life, the way he worked. So my holistic approach to total well-being encompasses how he lived his life. So, for example, he would eat healthily every day, light meals to keep that energy so that he could work really hard. And he didn't work, he played basically at Apple because he was so passionate about his quote unquote work that he was living his passion and purpose. So he had a very fulfilling career, to say the least, very fulfilling and successful career. He had very healthy relationships. He worked out, had a personal trainer several times a week. He meditated daily, right? So like he did all these things to take care of himself so that he was energized and thriving and really nourished to be able to make Apple the successful company that it is, and to have these great relationships and to be well. So the biggest bottom line lesson that I learned just through observation and being in his presence was well-being drives success. That is the most like strongest, and like what I base my entire company, what my book is based on, everything is based on well-being drives success. So in order to do well, you must be well. And that is the biggest takeaway I got from being in Steve Jobs' presence.
I appreciate you answering a couple of questions about your career over there. And I want to transition to what you do, because I think what you just said is so critically important. I teach a lot of entrepreneurs, and most of them are in startups. And the one thing that I can't get through to them most often is they're grinding all day. And I said, look, please take a time out for your health. Get in the gym, do some working out, focus on what you're eating. And the constant answer is, I don't have time for that. Right. And I love, there's a perfect example based on who you worked for. Clearly, not many people were busier than Steve Jobs doing what he did, but he made time for health. Can you talk about how important, this is a good reminder for people, how important their health and wellness, body and soul, is for their success in any level of their careers?
Right. So I was like those people that you're speaking of when I was younger. And the best advice I ever received in my life that I ignored, was dismissive of for years, actually a decade, was from my mother, who said, you should meditate. And she was saying that because she saw I was exhausted, drained, depleted, working in corporate, and like saying, I don't have time to meditate. The type of meditation I do now is TM. And that's what she was referring to. You have to take 2 20-minute sessions per day. So it's 40 minutes. I'm like, I don't have 40 minutes to sit there and do nothing. And she said to me, which this is what Steve Jobs knows and understands, is it doesn't take away from your day, it adds to it. You're going to be more energized and productive if you do it. I didn't see it that way being in my 20s. And like for 10 years, it took me to finally say, okay, now I'm ready. You have to be ready. And one question, I always ask myself and encourage my clients is like, how bad do you want to feel good? So it's only sustainable for it's not sustainable long-term, but maybe for short-term, you could get away with, sleeping less hours or not eating well or not exercising. For how long can you do that? Like eventually you're going to burn out. And so many of my clients come to me burnt out because they don't have these healthy habits in place. And so it is critical, if you want a sustainable, healthy, happy life, for you to be able to take care of yourself. I mean, it's common sense, and people understand it in theory, but not everyone practices it. Once they start practicing, get a little taste of it, a taste of how good they feel. I mean, I have clients, this is what I work on with clients, to instill these healthy habits, and they take time. It's not overnight. And then you start seeing the results and it's like, wow, oh my gosh, these great ideas came to me. I have so much energy. I was on top of my game and I killed it in that presentation. All these positive benefits of taking care of yourself, and I would say, start small. Like, don't turn your whole life around and say, okay, I need to sleep 8 hours a day. I need to eat healthily. I need to start, meditation practice, do all those every day. I would start small, pick one thing, incorporate it, and then add another, because it's too overwhelming and stressful in itself to turn your whole life around overnight, and it's not sustainable. So all people who study habits, like BJ Fogg, the author of Tiny Habits, he's a behavioral scientist at Stanford. He says to just start small, pick one thing and attach it to a habit that you're already doing in the morning. So for example, I use RPM, rise, pee, meditate. I wake up every morning, I have to go straight to the bathroom. Right after that, I meditate, right? So, and it's, if you're not a meditator, you want to start, don't do 20 minutes, start with a minute and increase slowly, but as long as you attach it to a current daily habit, that habit will be a trigger, and then what's coming next. And then reward yourself, say awesome, clap your hands, do something to seal in that positive behavior, and just keep doing it. And then keep increasing from small to medium to larger.
I love that. And creating habits is so important. In brief, for me, because I've worked out my entire life, but when I go through a phase where I'm not working out, I'm not productive. I'm all over the board. I start working out again. I'm up at 5, workout's done. I'm driving the kids to school by 8 a.m. My wife's like, you're in such a great mood. You got your workout in, right? So it just works on all levels. So thank you for sharing that. In brief, can you just tell us a little bit about your company, how somebody would find you, what they could expect if they were to seek you out and hire your services?
Sure. So I work with companies in 2 different ways. One is as a corporate wellness consultant. So I go in and create employee well-being programs. I do workshops. And in fact, I do workshops on become the CEO of your well-being all the time. And I speak at different companies and coach employees as well as leaders. There's also, I work with leaders, executive level and senior leadership, one-on-one coaching. And that looks like, 6-month to 12-month engagement of coaching them to fulfill their highest potential, both, in business, personal, and social. And so it depends on what you're looking for. And if you were interested in, for example, coaching, you would reach out to me. We would do a brief complimentary consultation to see what it is you're needing, if I'm the right fit. And then I could share about my program and move from there. And as far as speaking, I speak all the time at all the different companies on stress management, becoming the CEO of your well-being.
Excellent. Well, we'll put some show notes here and put your website up. Don't forget, she's got a book out, Pause, Breathe, Choose, Become the CEO of Your Well-Being. Check that out. And again, I want to thank you for that minute of meditation and getting us out of the zone. I think we all need that. And thank you for bringing value to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's show. It is my pleasure and honor to interview all of the guests that have been on the Answer is Yes podcast. If you have enjoyed the show, please go on iTunes and subscribe, give a rating, or simply tell a friend about the show. We also believe in the message of our guests and the positive influence of their stories. As my own mentor and coach, David Meltzer, has taught me, spend some time every day thinking and writing about the things in your own life that you have more than enough of. You will find out how blessed we really are. Please visit my website, livelifedriven.com, for the latest updates about me and what I'm doing. Plus, I post a monthly blog about the many topics on this show. This podcast can also be found there. As I learned early on in life, what you believe is what you will achieve. Thanks, Mark Victor Hansen. And thank you, and have a great week.